introduce Ron Turner, who will speak on a timely topic, trust in the U.S. election process. Please use the chat function to submit your questions to Ron. We will screen for duplicates and possibly combine or skip questions because of time constraints. Ron Turner was elected Sarasota County Supervisor of Elections in 2016. Supervisor Turner began his career with the Sarasota County Elections Office as Chief of Staff. He serves as Treasurer of the Florida Supervisor of Elections Statewide Association. In addition to his work as an elections administrator, Supervisor Turner has extensive governmental and nonprofit leadership experience. Supervisor Turner earned degrees from Eckerd College, the University of Missouri, and Harvard University. Mr. Turner serves on the Board of Directors of First Step of Sarasota, is a graduate of Leadership Sarasota County, and is a member of the Disabled American Veterans. Mr. Turner is a proud veteran of the United States Army. Please join me in virtually welcoming Ron Turner to our annual meeting. Ron, for you.
Thanks, Carol, and good afternoon to everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. I see a lot of familiar faces here. I feel a little bit like the Brady Bunch here with all the squares with the faces on them. But I think we're all kind of used to this environment with Zoom and virtual meetings that we've all had to do for more than the last year. Hopefully at some point we'll get to see people more in person again. I was fortunate enough to receive my second vaccine last Friday, so looking forward to that immunity and helping the cause with all of us, so that was a great experience at Sarasota Square Mall there, and the Department of Health individuals are doing a great job for us in Sarasota County, across Florida, and the health officials across the country and across the world. So trust in elections. Well, trust is a big topic, right? Whether that's trust in elections or trust in a variety of our institutions that we have in local government, state, federal government, in society at large. I think trust is a big issue for us as a society. And, I was thinking about that topic. I'm going to talk about 2020 and what happened in Florida. But thinking about the trust topic and thinking about what might engender trust in elections or what might help cause questions or potential lack of trust or erode trust. I was thinking of some things. How do you kind of measure that trust or doing a good job in elections, or what contributes to that? Sometimes I was talking to someone yesterday on the phone who told me they thought we did a good job in 2020 because they didn't read a lot of controversial news stories about us. I was thinking, well, that's one measure, I guess, of trust, right, from the public. The other thing I was thinking about in elections, in Florida during 2020, the presidential election was not particularly close. The candidates were separated by more than 3 percentage points. In Florida, in modern Florida history, that's pretty much a landslide, because most recent top of the ticket elections in Florida in recent years have been separated, the candidates, by about 1.2%, 1.4%, something like that. So more than 3% is a comfortable margin. I bring that up because comfortable margins between winning and losing candidates may help engender trust in elections as well, right? Because you don't, at that point, there wasn't a need for recounts like we saw in 2018 when we had 3 statewide recounts in Florida. What are some other things with trust? Transparency in elections. Making sure that information is accessible and available to voters, political parties, candidates, activists, groups, the media, anyone who's interested in the process, transparency, communication, making sure that we communicate what is going on in the elections process. That might be things of the nature of, where polling places are at, if one's closed or changed, communicating that in an effective way to individuals. Being proactive. So if you know something's changing or there's an issue or a challenge, getting ahead of it and putting that information out there. Sometimes it's an issue of, we maybe made a mistake somewhere along the line. Something's happened, and we need to let the public know about that issue, and being transparent and honest about that, and owning that. Or if you've got a change in, again, locations, equipment, something like that, being proactive in talking, reaching out to stakeholders. And collaboration. It's important, like being here today, talking to all of you, whether that's working with the League of Women Voters, working with the media, other community groups, communicating to political parties. I think I saw Joanne DeVries on this checkerboard somewhere, talking to her or her counterpart, Jack Brill, with the two major parties locally, and making sure they understand what we're doing, the processes, so they can help us. Other stakeholders. I see Kendra Muntz here, communicating with her group who are interested in voting equipment, elections, and things. So, but let's go back and talk about 2020 a little bit in Florida, and talk about what I think is the success that we had in Florida, because that's really primarily talking about, primarily Sarasota County and Florida at large, but that's really where I can share information about elections, because I think, as we all know, and I think a lot of Americans came to realize, if they didn't know, that elections in the United States are run by the states. So even federal elections are run by states, and there's no national system of elections in the United States. That's from the U.S. Constitution, that allows states to govern elections primarily. So I think many people that may not have been as aware of that fact certainly are more aware of that fact due to the 2020 elections. And the fact that we communicate nationally now, there's 24-hour news cycle, or Facebook, social media. So it's easy for us here in Florida, Sarasota, to hear something about what's going on in, Michigan or Pennsylvania or whatever that other state is, or even having friends and family sharing information about election laws and things, or election processes or things through Facebook, because we happen to be friends with people in another state. So I bring that up because, as supervisor of elections, primarily I'm focused on Florida law and what Florida does in elections. And in 2020, going back, the first election that we had in 2020 was the March presidential preference primary. That was March 17th. So we had 3 elections last year. I see former Supervisor Marilyn Gherkin here. She participated with me as one of the canvassing board members last year during the election. So thank you, Marilyn, for your service and still helping us in the elections here in Sarasota County. But back in March, if we all remember, Governor DeSantis announced the first cases of COVID in Florida in Hillsborough and Manatee counties on March the 1st. 2020. I think, as all of us know, or many of us may remember, the Manatee County COVID case was actually being treated and located here in Sarasota County at Doctors Hospital. So on the night before, which was February 29th, it was a leap year, I received a call from county administration that night saying that there was a letter from Doctors Hospital that was circulating on social media, and it appeared that we may have our first COVID case here in Sarasota County. And then the next day, the governor made the announcement with the Hillsborough and Manatee County cases. Well, we had an election statewide March 17th. So that hit us pretty hard in Sarasota County right away, because we were basically one of the counties that were ground zero for the pandemic in Florida. And so it's certainly not the ideal situation, being supervisor of elections, to have a pandemic under any circumstances. Who among us would have thought any of this? And certainly having an election, major election, 16 days later, because you can imagine what happened. And I think many of you know what happened, which was we rely on hundreds of poll workers to augment the 30 some odd staff that we have in the elections office. We typically hire hundreds of temporary workers and hundreds of more poll workers to help us run the elections in Sarasota County. Well, our poll workers tend to, the average age is 65 and older in that category. And the individuals in that category were thought to be at the greatest risk during the pandemic. And so we had hundreds of workers that could not help us. And we had hundreds of poll worker positions that went unfilled, or we had people that were dropping out. And I said at the time, I kind of felt like we've all heard the story about the boy or the girl in the dike, and there's a little hole that opens up and you put your finger in it, and there's another one that opens up and you put another finger in it. Well, I felt like that. I had toes and fingers going everywhere, trying to keep the elections in Sarasota County from going down the tubes, because I felt like the captain of the Titanic and we just hit an iceberg, and this wasn't ending too well, because it didn't feel like we had enough life vests and boats to go around for all of us. Right away, I called the Secretary of State's office within the first couple of days to express concern to the governor's administration, to let them know that, hey, we got a real problem down here. And well, we made it through, as Marilyn Gherkin knows, because she was on the canvassing board during that election with me. But I will say it was one of the more stressful elections I've ever been through in my career. But thank goodness for the staff that we have here, the poll workers that did stick with us, and temporary workers. Those individuals are my heroes and always will be my heroes, because if you think about it, at that time, everything was shutting down, but we didn't have face masks at that time, or really kind of plexiglass or social distancing. We knew that we were dealing with some type of deadly virus, but we didn't know the extent of it. So our folks here had to come to work every day facing thousands of people and not knowing what that was going to do to their health or their lives, frankly, at that point. So it was a very scary time for them, but no one complained. Everyone did their jobs and did it willingly. So when you see folks in the community, poll workers, temporary workers, canvassing board members, the permanent staff here in the elections office, they really are owed a big thank you from this community for what they did and stepped forward to do, especially at that time, because we didn't know as much then as we do today about all of this. So we then we went into August and November. We had still a number of poll workers that weren't available, but we did outreach to the community. Remember, I talked about trust, and I talked about communication and transparency at the beginning of this talk. So what did I do as supervisor of elections? I told the community the truth, that we had a problem and that we needed help. And people stepped forward to help us in ways that I had never seen in my career in elections before. That did not mean that that took away the need to combine some polling locations, because there were places that did not want us to come into their locations. We even had that as recent. We had a March election this year in the city of Northport, a special election. We had one precinct where a traditional polling location didn't want us to come. We talked about 6 different locations before we found a location that would even allow us to come in there. So this has still been an issue even to this year. But last year we had places that didn't want us to come in, but we made it work, and we had people step forward that had never been poll workers before that helped us out and filled the gap for them. And then, you know, we had the November election. We had more than an 80% turnout in Sarasota County. More than 80% of registered voters that were registered for the last general election voted. That's an amazing turnout. It's higher than the state average, higher than the national average. It is not the highest that we've ever had as far as the general election turnout, but it was right up there and close to one of the highest that we've had. So think about voters wanting to exercise their constitutional right to vote, all of our constitutional right to vote during this pandemic. That really says a lot about the electorate and our county and the voters here who really wanted to make their voices heard. One of the ways that, so there were some interesting things that occurred during the election that and one of those was the increase in number in vote by mail. Now, if you would have told me last year, earlier in the year, that vote by mail would become a controversial issue in Florida, I would have said, you're kidding, right? I mean, it's been around for 20 years in its current form in Florida. But there seemed to have been some confusion earlier in the year about the term vote by mail in Florida. I think all of you know here that in Florida, vote by mail is just another term for no excuse absentee voting. It started in 2002 as no excuse absentee voting, and then the Florida legislature changed the name in 2016 to vote by mail. Well, why did they do that? Well, because you didn't need an excuse any longer to vote absentee. And what is the root word of absentee? Absent. And you no longer had to be absent from your precinct to use that method of voting. So it made sense to change the name to vote by mail. But there was some confusion between vote by mail, the terminology, and mail ballots. We do not do mail ballot elections in Florida during elections that have candidates on the ballot. That's not allowed under Florida law. And in fact, in Sarasota County, we've only done, in my time, one mail ballot election. It was in 2015 for the town of Longboat Key, and they had a referendum. It was a question, and they wanted us to do it by mail, and we did it by mail. But mail ballot elections, you're not allowed to have candidates on that, and there's a whole nother set of rules under Florida law. Those ballots are not the same as vote by mail ballots, and the laws around them aren't even the same as vote by mail ballots. Different envelopes, different certificates that people sign. So it's not even the same thing. So there was some confusion about that. And so we dealt with that, you know, head on throughout the year. And, but what we did see was a huge increase in which wasn't surprising, in the number of people who decided to vote by mail, who felt that they needed that option instead of trying to go vote in person at a polling location or an early voting site. Typically in a general election, about 31 or 32% of voters vote by mail. More than 60% of voters typically vote before election day, either early voting or by mail. In this past general election, more than half of all voters in Sarasota County voted by mail. We had approximately 150,000 vote by mail ballots in Sarasota County. So between vote by mail and early voting, more than 80% of people voted before election day. That was a great thing, because we really could not have handled the same number of people voting in person that we had had in past election cycles because of the virus. Because again, trying to social distance and keep our folks safe with PPE and other things, we needed more people to look at their alternatives for voting last year, and they did. And with Vote by Mail last year, the other thing that was implemented for the first time were drop boxes in Florida. That was something new that was put into Florida law after the 2018 election cycle. So this was the first election cycle that we had drop boxes. Well, so our drop boxes in Sarasota County, the way that they were implemented, not that I implemented them in our office, was we did not have 24-hour a day, 7-day a week drop boxes. What we did was we had drop boxes manufactured that have, if you saw them or using them last year, they were on casters or on wheels, and we brought them out for the use of the public during time in our office or at early voting locations during early voting days and times, and they had staff there with them because I felt that having those boxes staffed and monitored by elections personnel was important. And then we also had drive-through drop boxes in Sarasota County to give individuals another option for not coming inside of a location. That way they could drive through. We had tents set up in Sarasota, Venice, and Northport, and they were able to drive through, drop the ballot in, and keep going. So I called that the ultimate social distancing experience for voting last year. Well, our boxes were a great success. We had about almost 75,000 people return ballots using drop boxes. So more than half of the people that voted by mail in Sarasota County that returned the vote by mail ballots voted using drop boxes. We have one of the highest drop box return rates in the state of Florida. Pinellas County is a little higher than us. They've been doing, they're really big in vote by mail there and do more vote by mail pretty much than any county in Florida. Pinellas does. But we were right behind them in our usage of drop box. And I've shared this information with some of our lawmakers and leaders so they know how much those were utilized by voters in Sarasota County. I mean, to think about 75,000 people that, walked in for the most part, some drove through, but most walked in and dropped that off. I mean, that's larger than the entire population of the city of Sarasota or the entire population of the city of Northport. That's a lot of people using drop boxes. So those were a success story for us in Sarasota County. So, we made it through that election. And it again was, last year was a tough year for all of us, and certainly nonetheless in the elections business. It definitely is an industry, I think, that I do think that individuals have maybe more appreciation for elections administrators than we used to in general. And I think that the public is more interested in elections administration than they were maybe even 5 years ago. People, know terms now like Dominion voting systems or other things that they did not know a year ago, 12 months ago. So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon in this as well, how much people are paying attention here to what we're doing in elections. So it certainly provides us an opportunity to hopefully educate the public about how elections are run and what goes into this. Right now, currently in 2021, we have a lot going on as well. One of the things that we're doing in the elections office right now is changing out some of our back office systems. So we are changing out our software that we use to hold our voter registration database here in Sarasota County. the software that we use that helps us manage our vote by mail ballots as far as that database and information and mailing, our campaign finance information, our website. So by next week, you will see a new website from the elections office here. And we're going to a new URL with that. We have been SarasotaVotes.com for many years, and that will remain. However, we are moving to a SarasotaVotes.gov primary URL. That's a security feature that the Homeland Security or other security individuals have asked us to do, which makes sense to me to let folks know that this is the official elections website. So when you're looking for trusted sources of information, because .com means commercial, right? And that's what that's for. I mean, those domain, the last three letters of that have certain meanings. So the .gov is a government one. You have to go through a special process to get that as a government agency. So we were able to get SarasotaVotes.gov and get the feds to approve that for us. So we're excited about that, and that will be coming up next year. We're also purchasing new ADA voting equipment in Sarasota County. The current under the law, you have to have accessible voting equipment in the early voting sites and in the precincts. And it would help someone, say, that's sight impaired, that may has difficulty with, maybe even using their hands and things, and they need like a sip and puff type device. These devices are ballot marking devices, and they provide voters the opportunity to mark their ballot independently. So not only is it required, it's the right thing to do. And the equipment that we have is a number of years old. And so we are working, I'm going before the county commission next week to ask for them to approve this item. I anticipate, I don't anticipate any issues from the Board of County Commissioners with this. I think they'll be supportive, and then we'll make that purchase and implement this new accessible voting equipment beginning with the November election, because the next election we have this November 2nd with the City of Venice. So that will give us time to get this equipment in and test it. And also we'll be doing outreach to the accessibility community to allow groups and individuals that may have a particular interest or need in using this type of equipment to come into our offices and demo this equipment to certainly help train and educate these individuals and help them gain a comfort with the usage of this equipment. So that's something that we're working on as well. Other new things in Florida. Florida has joined a consortium of states called ERIC, and it's a group called ERIC. It's the Electronic Registration Information Sharing Center. You can Google it, ERIC States, and it pops up and Google. And it is, I think, 30 states now in the District of Columbia who are voluntarily sharing voter data amongst those states. This was something that supervisors asked the legislature to consider joining. And so the legislature passed a law, and Governor DeSantis allowed his administration to sign this agreement and join this group. So we're pretty excited about this. We think that within a few weeks, hopefully in May, we'll start getting some of this information from states, but it'll help us as one more tool in trying to keep our voter rolls clean, and because it will show us if someone's registered potentially in one of these other states that inadvertently forgot to take their name off the rolls. It will be comparing DMV data from these states, looking at death data. We already do that through Social Security Master Death Index and Florida Vital Statistics, but it will help us with that, because voter registration list maintenance is something that you do primarily in odd years anyhow, because you can't do widespread list maintenance within 90 days of a federal election. I typically don't do any of that in 90 days of any election because it just seems to be good practice not to do that before any election, municipal, county, state, or federal elections for that matter. So there's been some questions. I know the league supports ranked choice voting in the city of Sarasota. I'll tell you what I know about that right now and give you an update on that. From that standpoint, ranked choice voting was something that the voters of the city of Sarasota put into the city charter in the early 2000s, and it was contingent upon us having a voting system in the county that could conduct that type of election. So we do have, with our ES&S voting system, we can create that type of ballot for the ranked choice voting system, but we do not have any software that will tabulate those ballots at this point. And I'm required as supervisor of elections to use the county's voting system that are certified by the state of Florida, because I think as many of you know, Florida does its own voting system certification. There are 2 certified vendors in Florida, ES&S and Dominion Voting Systems. We use ES&S in Sarasota County, and so we have to use that system to conduct our elections. It is likely that ES&S would need to have a software certified in Florida that would tabulate those votes, and currently they do not have that in Florida. However, I believe that that a ranked choice voting group has asked for it's my understanding, an opinion, a formal advisory opinion from the Florida Division of Elections on ranked choice voting in the city of Sarasota, and that the Florida Division of Elections is supposed to be answering this or providing this formal advisory opinion at some point. I talked to the Florida Division of Elections about this back in January, and their attorneys told me it was forthcoming, but I haven't heard anything else on this front since that time. So that's kind of the latest with ranked choice voting. Carol mentioned in my role in the Florida Supervisors of Elections Association. Actually, she mentioned treasurer. I'm actually secretary right now. I am the vice president-elect. So in June, I become vice president of the Florida Supervisors of Elections at our June conference. I will take office then. And then if things hold true, there's the potential that I will move into the president-elect role the following year and then become president of the Florida Supervisors of Elections statewide association in 2023. So I think that that's a great thing for us, hopefully in Sarasota County. And you know, I spent a lot of time working with my supervisor of elections colleagues around the state. There are only 67 of us, plus our staffs. It's a small group of people. It's an intimate group, as Marilyn Gerken knows from her time as supervisor of elections. And it's an important group for us to share ideas, share best practices, share when things go right or wrong in your counties, and to help each other learn and grow. And sometimes it's just a shoulder to cry on when you need someone to talk to that can understand what you're going through in the elections administration arena, because it is a niche field and profession. So there aren't a lot of people to talk to that work in this field. I did hear yesterday that the census released their information. It sounds like Florida is getting one additional seat in the House of Representatives, so that will increase our electoral votes. So go Florida. We'll see. What's really going to be the fun part, as you all know, is the league. Since I think it's the league's lawsuit in 2016 who changed the redistricting in Florida years after it occurred. But it'll be interesting to go through the redistricting process. The supervisor of elections does not do the redistricting, but we do work with our state partners, our county, school district, municipal partners, because this is when everyone will be doing their districts. So I actually have a full-time mapping person on staff, a GIS staff member, because that's how important maps are to us and that data. And we work with them to help overlay their maps and their lines onto our county precincts here in Sarasota County. I know 10 years ago, there was a major re-precincting in Sarasota County where we went from 156 precincts down to 99. And there could be some changes next year. I don't know yet, but I don't foresee us having quite the major re-precincting that we did 10 years ago. So right now, we'll be taking a look at that internally with the staff, but I am not anticipating that kind of huge change again. We will take a look at our precinct boundaries to see if we need to make any changes, and then also our numbering, because 10 years ago, when we did the re-precincting, we came up with a new numbering scheme because at that time their precincts were numbered 1 through 156. Well, precinct 1 might be up in the, if you were looking at a map, at the northwest corner of the county, but somehow precinct 13 might be in Inglewood or something. I mean, it was all over the place. So most people didn't know what those numbers were, where they were in the county. So we came up with a numbering scheme based on the 5 county commission districts. So the precincts would correspond to the county commission districts, the 100 series, 200, 300, etc. So it was precinct 101, 103. Well, that worked until we did the redistricting last year, and that doesn't exactly line up any longer with the county commission districts. So we'll have to think about that numbering scheme to see if that's something we we need to make any adjustments there. And we'll take a look at that for next year and see what may or may not make sense with that. So with that, I'm gonna open up for questions. I really appreciate the opportunity to serve all of you as supervisor of elections. You know, I've had the opportunity, as many of you know, I was supervisor of elections in DeSoto County before I moved to Sarasota County 20 years ago. And I first became interested in becoming a supervisor of elections when I was a teenager. I had a neighbor in DeSoto County that ran for sheriff, and he ended up getting elected. But my summer off from school at the time, he took me with him to knock on doors and go to Rotary Club meetings and talk to groups and things. And he saw I was taking an interest in government politics. And he said, you know, he said, I think a really great job for you someday would be to consider running for supervisor of elections. So I was 14 or 15 and I'm 52 now. So that has been a lifelong goal and mission. I'm blessed to have done this twice in 2 different counties. I'm the only person to have done that, thanks to you and you allowing me to do this. I have told other counties, they joke with me, I'm like, I'm not moving to your county next to be this, you try to run for supervisor of elections. Sarasota's home. I've been here for more than 20 years now. I love what I do. I appreciate the opportunity to do this for all of you. It's important work, as we all see, and know and understand. And again, I tell people, listen, you know, we're not perfect in Sarasota County, but we do our best to try to follow the law, to try to provide secure, fair, accessible elections. We listen, we cooperate, you know, we learn from our mistakes. So we're always trying to improve the process for the voters of Sarasota County after each election. And again, I just am thankful and appreciate each and every one of you, and appreciate what you do as a league, as a collaborative part of this whole voice in elections and voice in our community, state, and country. So it's important as we all work together to make the process better and to work together. So thank you. Appreciate that so much, Carol.
Thank you, Ron. And that brings me to one of our first comments. Ron, if it's okay, we have some discussion in the chat, and just to make it a little bit easier, I'll read you the question if that's okay with you.
Okay.
And First, we've got Phyllis, who thanks you for your proactive positions during your term as supervisor of elections. And I think we can all echo that. Thank you, Ron, for everything you've done for Sarasota County and for the integrity of our elections. The questions from the audience seem to, so far, focus on Senate Bill 90 and the other bills being considered that may touch on voting process. Tracy asks, do Florida Supervisor of Elections have a consensus on the voting bills currently before the Florida legislature? Have you personally been asked for input, and are you allowed to take a position on the legislation? And Vilya asks, what does Senate Bill 90 mean in terms of your day-to-day work as supervisor of elections?
All right, so good questions. Never heard of Senate Bill 90. I'm just teasing. Of course, I've heard of it. We've been working a lot on this, our state association, for weeks now. And obviously, I get a lot of questions about this every day. So one, I mentioned the Florida Supervisors of Elections. It used to be called Florida State Association of Supervisors of Elections, as Marilyn Gerken knows. And then a couple of years ago, we shortened it and changed it to Florida Supervisors of Elections, because people can understand and grasp that. That's the 67 supervisors in Florida who are the members of that group. We work with the legislature on these types of issues. We have a legislative committee. It's chaired by Alan Hayes, who's a supervisor of elections in Lake County and a former state senator. And then we have a legislative kind of affairs person that works with us in Tallahassee, that works with members of the committees, their staff members and things. That's not to say we get everything we want out of these bills and legislature, but we do work with them when things are proposed like this to try to say, well, these are the impacts of some of these things, or this is what might work well, but this doesn't work so well because here's why. And in the real world, coming down here from the Capitol, when the rubber meets the road and you're actually applying these laws, why this is a problem for things. Now, some of these things have changed. In the beginning of the Senate Bill 90, remember, the proposal was to zero out all the vote by mail requests. So there would be no vote by mail request, or there would not have been, as of July 1. Well, and everyone would have had to make a new request. Well, that was changed, and that's no longer a part of that. The supervisors of elections work with the legislature on that. So anyone that has a request before July 1, it's my understanding. Let me back up a minute, because we're talking about Senate Bill 90, which is passed the Senate. But none of this is law, because the House has their own version, which is different than the Senate version, and they're going to have to come together on this stuff. So let me preface it with that. So we're just talking about what's passed the Senate and what's kind of proposed at this point. So I just want to make that clear to everyone so everyone understands. So that was the initial part of the Senate side, and we worked on that. There was also a proposal at that time to roll back the vote by mail request to 1 calendar year. We let the legislature know that, hey, you know, this would be an issue, say during a presidential preference primary. Those elections are in March. If you cut off the vote by mail request December 31st, and people are expecting ballots within weeks, how do you get ballots to men and women and, you know, halfway around the world somewhere who are expecting this? How do we communicate with these people? So we communicated those issues to them. The first proposal was to do away with drop boxes in the Senate bill. We got the vote by mail drop boxes. We worked on having those returned. Now there's question about how, you know, staffing those or things, which we already did in Sarasota County. As I said, we didn't have 24-hour days, 7-day a week. I looked at what the law was last year, and I also looked at what I thought the intent of the law was at that time, and tried to, you know, follow it precisely in what I thought that they wanted done with the drop boxes, and that's what we did here in Sarasota County. So I try to be careful because the question is about allowed to take a position. I try to be careful with that. I don't want to get too, I want to get involved enough to represent the interest of the voters in Sarasota County, let the legislature know the impacts of some of these things without getting too politically involved, because these things are fraught with politics, right? Whether it's Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, progressives, whatever. We try to stay out of that as supervisor of elections because that's not my role. And I don't want to do something to try to influence the process in some way that could change an outcome of an election or influence an outcome or tilt it one way or another. So you're always looking for that kind of that balance. But we do communicate with them regularly and meet with them. I mean, our folks, I haven't been part of this team, but I do know the team, the leadership team that has been meeting with them have met for hours and hours with legislative members of the legislature, legislative leadership, people from the governor's office to talk about these issues and things. So I will let you know we're doing our best to communicate how these things might impact voters in our counties, like the signature thing. There was a lot of conversation about a wet signature versus a digital signature and how old these signatures were and things for making a vote by mail ballot comparison. And so there were several changes to this bill during that, because one of the things that we expressed is, listen, millions of Floridians registered to vote at the DMV. So guess what? They may not have a wet signature with our office. Wet meaning they signed a paper form. Through the DMV or online voter registration, probably 70% or so of our voter registration or updates to voter records come through those online methods through DMV or online voter registration. So we're not even getting paper applications from people. So that was certainly something that we needed to communicate with the Senate and with legislators about these things. And then, also reminding them that, hey, Florida did a good job last year. Again, not perfect. And certainly we've learned a lot over the last 20 years in elections. The 2000 election was kind of the beginning of the real change in elections administration in Florida and the United States. And it's certainly escalated since then in the last 4 years. But, one of the things that I always say in elections you have to be careful about too is it's almost like an assembly line to me when you're administering elections. And on that assembly line, if you start to take a widget off or add one on, or you start turning dials on there, you may not like the model of Tesla that rolls off the other end there, because until you actually apply this into the field somewhere, you don't know what the impacts are going to be. And then it could be a year or two before you can go back and change those. And we've seen that before with positive effects and sometimes not as positive effects when we talk about it. So it's, hopefully that answers some of that.
Thank you, Ron. There is a follow-up question to that. And are you comfortable estimating, I know these things are in flux, but do you have an estimate for what it might cost in Sarasota County to implement Senate Bill 90, House Bill 7041 as they present?
I don't know yet. Originally with Senate Bill 90, we had estimates, but those have changed because the bill has changed since then. Initially, as I said, when there was discussion about completely zeroing out the vote by mail in Florida, meaning no vote by mail no vote by mail requests, and we'd have to start that clock all over again statewide. We were estimating millions and millions of dollars statewide that it would cost. Here in Sarasota County, I was saying in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I communicated that through our association. I also communicated that to legislators here. Why would that be? I said, well, if I've got 150,000 people that have a vote by mail request and you cancel all those requests, don't you think I'm going to communicate with those people to tell them that? So just the cost of a letter or whatever to do that, it's probably about $1 a person by the time you do the postage and everything else. So that's $150,000 right there. Let's ballpark it because I'm not going to wait for, you know, Martha Jones to wait next to the primary election next year, waiting by her mailbox for a ballot to come that's never going to come because her request was canceled. I mean, you have to communicate this and then offer to have a new request. So that went by the wayside, but we did estimate cost on that initially. But this has changed so much and so rapidly. We don't even have that yet because we don't even know what this is going to be in the end. My guess is there's going to be more changes before this is over with, when the two chambers of the legislature negotiate this to the end, because you've got the House bill, that's Representative Ignolia's, and then you've got Senator Baxley's bill. And there's some similarities, but there's some differences in those two bodies and what they want to do. So will they come together? Will they agree on something that's not even in there now? Will they drop some of these things? It's going to be interesting to see how all of this works out as the session winds down here and comes to an end. So no, at this point, I don't. I'm sorry that I can't tell you that because I just don't know. And we don't even know what the final thing is going to be. But it is something I've spent hours watching and monitoring these hearings. I've tried to watch every hearing and when they've been on the floor of the Senate and all of this. So to keep a close eye on it for you and communicate everything that I can with our legislators, those who have been involved, and through our lobbyists and state association, the best that I can.
Thank you, Ron. All right. Another question has to do with Florida election law compared to that of Arizona, for example. The audit of the Arizona vote is going on right now. In Florida, could a partisan group demand all the ballots from an election and recount them without nonpartisan safeguards? Where do we stand in terms of Florida election law?
Well, that's a good question. Several interesting things about this. The audit, and I think hopefully everyone here knows or has been paying attention to the news starting over the weekend about the Maricopa County audit in Arizona. Several interesting things about that. One is it's not a citizen group, it's the Senate, the Arizona Senate that is doing this audit. So that's where it initiated. So they actually subpoenaed these things, the ballots and the equipment and things. And so that branch of government seems to have the legal authority there to do that. We've never experienced something like that here. The other interesting thing that came up over the weekend is the company that was hired seems to be a Sarasota company that is overseeing the audit. I did not know that. I was asked about that in the last 24 hours. There was a national kind of story in Politico about that today, where they were reaching out to some of us in Sarasota County and then across Florida to see how familiar we are with the company. And to my knowledge, I don't have any information about them. It was kind of, it's curious that occurred. So that's in Politico if you want to see that story today about that. But as far as it depends, obviously before an election's certified, the only people that touch ballots in Florida law are elections officials. So to have someone come in to count after the fact, we've never had that. But Florida law is pretty specific on who can touch ballots. Typically, when we have had groups that wanted to come in to look at ballots, we've held them up. They pay us to actually sit with them, and we show them the ballots and go through that. Because you certainly want to protect the integrity of those things, right? I mean, the ballots and the equipment. And we do that. As I said, Marilyn Gerken has served on the canvassing board even last year. And so we have observers and people that are in during the election, whether it be for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or candidates that are on the ballot or even presidential candidates last year. We had Biden and Trump campaign people here watching what we were doing, but they can observe and we can show them, but they can't actually physically touch the things. Now, how that would work 6 months later in Florida, with either the legislature getting involved or a court, who knows? Because we've seen things occur over the years in elections. But typically, Florida law is pretty strict on who can touch ballots and that sort of thing. The other thing is you know, to my thought, with an audit, if someone wanted to do that, it would basically be a public records request, and it would be pretty expensive to do that. So someone would have to pay for that. The difference is in Arizona, I think the Senate is helping to fund part of this audit. But here, if that were to occur, unless, like I said, the legislature or someone did that, it would be a private group and they would have to pay for that. And it would not be an inexpensive type of mission, but it would never be a recount because Florida law is strict on that. A recount is automatic, a machine or a manual recount based on the percentages between the winning and losing candidates. So there's no requested recount. You can request one, but my answer and the canvassing board answer is going to be no. You don't get to do that and pay for one. The law doesn't allow it in Florida. So,
thank you. Ron, do you happen to remember any of the words in the title of that Politico article in case somebody wanted to search
no,
for it?
I saw it today. I know Mark Caputo is the writer of that. I think Mark might have been with the Miami Herald or something before he contacted our office yesterday, and I didn't talk to him. One of the staff did here. They passed it along. But I just said, tell Mr. Caputo, I mean, I don't know anything about this company. I don't have anything to say because I had never even heard of them before this occurred. I just found it interesting since we all live in Sarasota that, you know, this is going on and we're all involved either in elections or, you know, are advocates or whatever for policy and paying attention to these sorts of things. And it just, so I saw it over the weekend and I had a friend from Arizona that reached out to me about it. And I figured that by Monday, I'd be hearing from either the public or the media on that, being the supervisor of elections, and right on track.
There it was. Ron, I think we have one more question for you. I know it's time to wrap up, but I'm going to ask you just for a ballpark estimate on this one. If you had to weigh the risks to an election, to election integrity, from residents of the United States versus hackers, foreign entities, external threats, which is the greater threat to election systems in your opinion? Residents here in the country or foreign actors?
Well, it's interesting. You know, election security became a big topic starting in 2016, as we all know, with that election. So at that time, for that November election, Kathy Dent was the supervisor. I had run and was elected, took office in January, but worked as her chief of staff. And she and I sat in on a call with the FBI and Homeland Security and things at the time, which is the first of that occurrence ever in my career that we'd had anything like that. And it was to let us know that Florida had experienced some potential hacking. It was not voting systems, you know, it was online, a different type of hack. But that was the beginning of that. And then that was covered, I think, in the Mueller report and the Senate intelligence reports and things. So after that, moving forward, President Obama and then President Trump continued, and I'm assuming President Biden as well, making elections administration part of the critical infrastructure of the United States, like the power grid or banking or whatever, that we're so fundamental, so foundational to the country, and that they made us part of that critical infrastructure, which completely makes sense. Now, what that did for us was, as well, again, moving forward, having worked with Homeland Security, the FBI, I mean, I've had those individuals here in Sarasota County in my office here, doing security assessments for us. One of the things that we all did in Florida was add a sensor to our networks here called an Albert sensor that the feds ask us to do. And Florida was the first state to have one of these sensors statewide and in every county network in Florida. So we were the very first state in the United States to have 100% compliance with these sensors that were looking for any type of, that would alert us to any type of activity on our networks coming in or out, potential hacking there and things. And then we started, working with our staff and training and looking for ways to protect our network, what things they should be looking for with phishing emails. In fact, I do a training with them where folks get emails that look like they're from UPS or something like that, asking them to open up an attachment. Things, well, it's a training exercise. So if they fall for the phishing attempt, then it directs them to go through remedial training and things for this, and we do this. I mention all those sorts of things because we have been working on that. And a physical posture here, we have tightened our security in different areas on some of our floors. I'm on the 7th floor in the terrace building. We're even working on that now because we will have an intercom buzzer to get into this floor, because we're having to look at our physical security now in relation to elections. And frankly, moving out of the 2020 election cycle, and I'll just leave it there, but physical security is important for us also from a variety of perspectives. It has been, but it's increasingly so now. So you're looking at that cyber aspect, you're looking at that physical aspect, but as far as threats, I mean, and someone just put up the Mark Caputo article, so thanks for doing that, in the chat box. So the voting system isn't on the voting system isn't on the internet, right? So our voting system doesn't sit on the public-facing internet. We do have wireless transmission from our voting equipment, but the voting system, the server and things are not connected to the public-facing internet as we know the internet. So that's one thing that of security there with the voting system. Of course, websites and things can be hacked into. I received a letter. You can see it here. It's handwritten from a voter. About an 11-year-old hacking into, a mock-up of the state election result website. So they were upset because they heard me say what I just said about the voting system to their group, and they thought I wasn't exactly being forthcoming because this 11-year-old hacked into this website, and that's connected to the voting system. Well, no. That website, it was a dummy website of election results. This was from 2018, actually, what they're referring to. Occurred out in Las Vegas, I think, at some type of computer conference, and the 11-year-old hacked into it was a website. So our website with election results, the state of Florida's website with election results, of course that can be hacked into, but guess what? Those aren't the election results, and that's not connected to the voting system in the county. The canvassing board actually signs paper certificates with the election results that are transmitted to Tallahassee. Those are the election results. You just don't see them as the public. So those other things are just informational. They're not the actual election results and things. But, I'm getting through all of this because you're asking for threats. So that in itself, like that, sometimes just sometimes a lack of understanding of how things work. Elections administration is very complicated. Elections are very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts to this. I like to take opportunities like this with this voter to talk to them as an educational opportunity to help better understand how this works. But I think that, maybe a lack of understanding of how laws work, how processes work, listening to things on social media, because as we all know, there's a lot of information that's shared very quickly. Some of it's not good, some of it is good, but there's way more information out there now than there used to be for people to get. And it's from a variety of sources, and not all of them are the best sources of information. So that certainly is a challenge for any of us in society, whether it's vaccinations for COVID or what that is, elections, it's been a challenge for us trying to communicate information to things to say, hey, you need to follow Sarasota Vote on Facebook or Twitter and find the information, get the information from us, because we're the trusted source of information. Sure, your friend can tell you about something and maybe they have the right information, but do you know that, that they have the correct information? But I think certainly that information sharing, how information shared, where information is coming from, understanding or lack of understanding of processes and information is certainly a challenge. I'll put it that way in that. And we've certainly seen that since November moving forward in a lot of ways.
That's for sure. Ron, thank you. It's been a really informative session. We're so glad to have the opportunity to talk with you, and I'm glad you could be with us today. We give you a virtual round of applause and hope you'll come back and join us again.
I appreciate all of you, as I said, and thanks for allowing me to do this for you. I love it, and I'm always here, and just feel free to reach out if you need anything from us or have questions or things. That's what we're here for, so thank you.
Thank you. See you soon, Ron. Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
take care. Bye-bye.